Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, for this kind introduction. So hello, good afternoon from my side as well. I'm pleased to be here and to tell you a little bit about the experiences we've made at Hanover Re with an innovative and new technology provided by MarkLogic for parts of a solution that we built for the underwriting space. I guess I need the green button? Okay, thank you. Maybe a quick introduction. Hanover Re is one of the top reinsurance companies in the world, typically ranking between as a second or third, depending on the line of business. And they basically transact all insurance business, properties and casualties, or life and health, P&C, life, L&H. And the example we're talking about in the next couple of minutes is from the life and health space. So as you can see, it's a pretty global company, and the project that we went through for actually more than 3 years involved many of these locations, from North America, Australia, South Africa, many European locations, and also we're looking to expand into the Asian insurance market. So let's start with looking at what typical primary insurance companies these days face in terms of market challenges. If you're familiar with selling insurances or buying insurances, actually, it is basically the same process that goes through different variations. It's from capturing a customer's interest through providing information about different insurance products to the point where the interest materializes that someone wants to buy a policy. Then a central process step called underwriting takes place before it then eventually turns into a policy, and the policy over its lifetime will be serviced, and eventually there will also be claims. Underwriting is the insurance term for looking at a specific risk and making a decision if this is a good risk or a bad risk, and if you want to be part of that business or not. But things have changed from the way traditional insurance processes work. First of all, it's most of the time sold online in different countries, and people are coming from digital experiences in their consumer parts of their lives. They are used to having experiences brought to them by Apple, other companies, and they increasingly look at insurance companies to provide the same level of experience as with other products. Secondly, there is a tendency to move to individual solutions. So maybe 10 years ago, there was a very limited number of products that you could actually sell in the life and health space. And they were basically all the same, depending on the cover. But there's a tendency in the market that people want insurance protection right for the situation which they are in. And this leads to a great variety of offerings, actually, which is, again, a challenge from the risk perspective. Thirdly, the way insurance is sold today and in the future, it's primarily driven by the expectations and by the way customers dictate that process. So the customer actually is in the driving seat of the sales process and not the insurance company or the risk carrier. That's also a fundamental change in what's happening in the marketplace. And there's with everyone moving online with digital sales process, it's very important that you catch the magic moment. You may be, as a customer, you may be referred to a specific insurance website by an aggregator site or by a Google search. And if the insurance portal isn't attractive and doesn't provide you with what you're looking for immediately when you're there, the competition is just a click away. So it's the magic moment. You have to capture the attention, and you have to finalize this business in one transaction. That has consequences, for example, like digital signatures, do away with all the paperwork, and have a complete digital insurance sales process. But this is a challenge for IT systems, especially when we talk about different channels, different sales channels, like mobile sales channel, bank insurance, and even more difficult when people change the sales channel during a transaction. So they start with an online sales, and they get stuck, they need assistance, and the case is then transferred over to a contact center, which calls you back and completes the case together with you. And going back to a point that Gary in his speech made earlier this morning, this is, as we speak now, this is prevented with many companies by data being in silos, being not connected with each other. There's increasing pressure on cost and efficiency. Automation is the key to pertaining margins in the market. And optimal cost and pricing structure when it comes to products is only possible if you automate as much as you can. Otherwise, fintechs or insurance tech companies will catch a lot of the business that's currently or sits with the insurance company. So that's a threat, and you have to react to that as a primary insurance company. So depending on which products you sell, you are looking for an automation rate of up to 90%, maybe even more. So why is this a reinsurance problem at all? I mean, we were talking about the challenges of a primary insurance company. Historically, primary insurers, which are the clients of the reinsurance company, they have been looking for expertise in various fields from the reinsurers. And typically, this was decision-making for complicated medical cases, for example. So risk sharing was one of the disciplines where reinsurance companies and primary insurance companies cooperated for decades, even centuries. And underwritten policies were agreed, and the reinsurer, again, provided knowledge and expertise for difficult cases. Now that with everything becoming digital, underwriting is essentially becoming an automated process. It's not anymore humans looking at an application and making a decision. It is a system that contains all the decision-making rules that makes the decision. So it's, well, basically a machine-to-machine communication at the end of the day. So clients, again, primary insurers, again, are looking to their reinsurance for expertise, how to solve the digitization problem related to underwriting in the new world. And even clients demand complete automation solutions from reinsurers. This is the primary reason why a company like Hanover Re, which is an insurance company and not a software company, is in the business of producing and selling software systems to maintain their client relationships with primaries. So in the meantime, over the last 2 or 3 years, this is a highly competitive area, and it's actually a competitive factor in winning new reinsurance business to also provide a superior solution for the underwriting automation. So that's the reason why Hanover Re decided a couple of years ago, 2012, to build a complete new system with all these challenges and business requirements in mind. And when we set out with initial concepts, we wanted to be sure that we actually deal with every sales channel. So from typical agency sales situations, as you can see in the upper right corner, to tele-underwriting, where you call in using your mobile phone or your phone, and someone guides you through a questionnaire with questions and answers, to traditional or online bank assurance, to the mobile world on the right lower corner, especially transitioning transactions from one channel to the other, from an online insurance sales, for example, to the tele-underwriting contact center, is especially important to not lose clients in any of those channels, and guide people through to the point of decision making and policy acceptance. So if we come back to this process for a second, and let's focus on the middle part, from the information to the policy making. This is where all the knowledge currently goes in. So we're not dealing with services and claims and not in the interest phase. I think we need to replay the animation. The middle part of the system consists of a rule engine, which does the risk assessment. It is assisted by a suite of components to bring in third-party data for better decision making. I'll give you an example in just a few minutes. This is all exposed through an integration middleware with REST endpoints. Then there is a highly configurable mobile or web sales portal that guides people through this customer journey as a workflow system. We have an editor that contains basically all the knowledge for decision making, all the insurance products, all information about the factor rules, medical factors, occupational factors, avocational factors, where you live, if you plan to travel abroad, financial information, everything that helps make a better decision. It's all contained as rules in the visual editor, as well as business rules, application forms, so the way the question and answers are structured, and all the translations in case of a multilingual business entity. This is what we call the design time, and this is where MarkLogic comes into play. All of these data produced in a runtime system, taking requests from clients to the point of producing policies. All of this information will end up in a central data warehouse for analysis. And of course, the reason why we're doing this is we want to have feedback and learning. So we want to derive business insights from the management information part and feed this insight back into the way we code the rules, and the rules are then redeployed to the runtime and business improves. And this is, an endless cycle of continuous business improvement. So maybe a little bit more detail. So clients connect with any device, could be a mobile phone, could be an iPad, could be a PC, could be a phone, depending on the channel, to the sales front end. The knowledge editor in blue is hosted and maintained and operated by Hanover. It's not operated by the client. It transfers a so-called knowledge base that is used for all the decision making to the runtime. And then I mentioned third-party services before. Third-party services, especially relevant in the United States, where a number of corporate or commercial databases are available to bring in additional information about a person. For example, if you answer no to the question of drinking alcohol on the health questionnaire, the system is able to reach out to the US motor vehicle records, and if you're caught several times for drunk driving, there will be an information mismatch. The data just does not reconcile, and the case will be referred to a manual underwriting. Depending on the face amount of the policy, they may or may not call you back. In the management information part, again, hosted at Hanover Re as a central service solution, they receive the underwritten applications and policies at the end of the day. I'm going to explain some more about this data warehouse in just a few seconds. So let's quickly look how this is working. While all the runtime components are individual because they're highly customized for each client, the data warehouse is not. The data warehouse is a shared service. It's a shared component. It's available for everyone. And clients produce their applications, transfer them in a secure way into the data warehouse. So to give you an idea of volume, for example, a typical client, mid-sized client, maybe even a large client, depending on the market, may produce 2,000 applications per month. But it's about 24,000 applications a year. Typical lifetimes of these systems range between 7 and 12 years. So let's assume it's 10 years. That would take us to 240,000 applications per client for a lifetime of the system. For 10 clients, there would be 2.5 million applications. For 100 clients, 25 million. So speaking about big data, this is certainly not big data. It is significant data, but it's not a lot compared to today's standards. But there's value in basically every piece of information in those applications. If we look at more detail, how the system works, an installation of this HR Reflex system, which is the name of the product, will eventually produce applications in JSON or XML. They would go through an MI, management information upload system, running in the client system landscape because of data protection laws. It will go through an anonymization step, so all the information that would allow a third party to re-identify the person in the data warehouse is reduced or even completely removed. This is why it's so important that it runs on the client side, because otherwise the data would travel through the target system already, and it has to be, at the point of origin, it has to be anonymized. Then there is the secure line to the central system at Hanover Re, where we go to a ingest pre-processing step, but it's not much happening. And compared to what Gary was explaining in the morning about ETL, extract, transform, and load, we're not doing any transformation on the ingest step, just annotations. And by purpose, there is a SQL data warehouse. That was the way we started the project in the original design phases, because the IT architects at Hanover Re, they were used to solving all database or all data-related problems, I have to say, with relational technology. And being very Microsoft-minded, we set out designing schemas for Microsoft SQL Server. On the user side, users would use the iPad or a browser to connect to a web server, displaying a dashboard to the data that they periodically upload in an anonymized form. So the goal being here is not to replace existing BI landscapes within clients, but to offer a quick and easy solution to look at the business that they're writing just by using their browser and creating their own self-service reports. I can show you a few screenshots in a couple of minutes. So as I said, when we started the project, the thinking in the IT department, especially in the application architect department, was very relational. So what follows is a fictitious dialogue between the business side and the business requirements and the IT architect's responses. And they said, well, it's a data warehouse at the end of the day, so let's do an upfront design of the data model, what it would eventually look like. And let's start with looking at the functions, looking at the data flows, looking at the data stores that your system is going to have. And this is a very small snippet from what we built. And they said, wow, okay, there's a lot of data flows happening in the system. Let's maybe focus on the data layer. That's the middle part. That's complicated enough. And they set out and said, well, it's okay. It's a little bit more complicated than we thought it would be, but we're very confident we can get the job done. And they asked, let's look at the data types. What data do we have to deal with in the target system? And we said, we definitely have very structured data for IDs, for personal records, for financial records. We have standardized medical records that we can ingest into the system. But we may see semi-structured data. Questions and answers will vary very greatly between different clients, even between the products. So the structure of the elements is up to the client. The client can design the flow of questions and answers very freely. So it's very difficult to put this down into a relational model that's efficient. You can do it. Technically, it's possible, but it's not straightforward, and it's probably very, very prone to constant change. And we may see free text entries, especially if you go to the field of manual underwriting, where people taking decisions, they will annotate a case, put in free text in whatever language they are familiar with, and feed the case back into the system. So that's nothing we can really predict. We will see textual documents. We will see doctor's reports. On a worldwide basis, there is no standard for a doctor's report. Likewise for lab results or financial statements. So if you're above $1 million in face value, you have to hand in financial statements for the underwriter to make sure that you can pay your premium. They look different across the world. Binary or encoded data, back to the example I gave a couple of minutes ago, where we reach out to third-party databases. They would respond with a binary block of proprietary data that's highly relevant for the underwriting process, but there's no chance of even thinking about standardization. So we need to prepare to deal with that and make sense of it. And well, at the end of the day, we need to be ready to take in data that we don't know yet. And maybe it's machine-to-machine data, it may be log data, maybe Origo or code industry standards, but it could also be clickstream data. If you think back to the way insurance is sold with a customer journey on the web, it is highly natural to capture the interaction profile as well. to fine-tune your sales, not just your underwriting. So we were not quite sure what to expect at the end of the day in terms of data requirements. And then back to the IT department, they said, well, interesting. We think we have the right technology to do all that, but it's going to take a little bit more time to come up with a schema and with a design that will meet all these requirements. And then they said, well, before we do that, can we rely on the fact that these assumptions are actually fixed, that they're not going to change while we are building the design? And we said, well, from our end, maybe, but we need to think clients. It's a client application at the end of the day. And they may want to set up new insurance products with totally different properties that we don't know of yet. They may make changes to the way they ask their questions and they expect their answers, arbitrary changes. And they can make those changes on their own. Those changes do not have to go through a Hanoveri kind of a review and approval cycle. They may choose to regroup risk factors entirely, or even take risk factors out. In certain markets, you're not allowed to ask for diseases. In others, they're highly relevant for decision making. For example, HIV. No one in South Africa would ask for HIV because it would rule out maybe 40% of the population. But in Russia, it's a killer question. So they may regroup and re-emphasize those risk factors. Or they may introduce combinations. If you're a baker, but you have an allergy, dust allergy, that may be a combination for income protection that rules you effectively out. They may introduce new business rules leading to new results or even new result types that the data warehouse has to be prepared for. They may add sales information, not just underwriting relevant or risk relevant information, but information about how to optimize the sales process. Or they may, from a marketing perspective, identify different target groups and do true A/B testing. So one person is getting a very simplified questionnaire for the very same product, while others, 90% of the others, are getting the full questionnaire. And you see, you try to find out the difference of how your conversion rate would change, while the risk profile would maybe stay the same. That's an indication for simplifying your process. And all of this will end up being in JSON files to be interpreted and stored in the system for later on analysis. You may have multiple passes through the engine. If the system can't make a decision, the case is referred, a manual underwriter looks at the case and takes a decision or adds annotations and fires it back to the automation engine. You can see up to 3 or 4 different passes on several cases. And that would lead to different elements in the system to be interpreted. Highly complex. Or clients, as always, they may want to do something that we haven't thought of when designing the system, but we need the flexibility to deal with that there and then. So the architect said, okay, so that would take us to schema versioning, but I think the better solution would be that you stop dreaming and you start to reduce to what you really need from a business perspective. And then we said, well, actually, that's the new system, but we have existing underwriting systems in the market, first and second generation systems. They are in production around the world with a number of clients, and they are very, very different when it comes to a data format. But what clients want when they migrate from the first or second generation to the new one, they want seamless reporting. They want their reports based on the old system to look identical to the reports on the new system. So we have to, magically align the data underneath. And then they said, well, it's not doable. Now, it may be, technically, it may be doable, but we would need forever. And, given the dynamics in the field, you have to make sacrifices. Just have to make some sacrifices to be realistic. And we said, well, these sacrifices actually, we would, if we can, we would like to avoid them because it will reduce the value proposition that we bring to the market. And with everything you said, it will still be a very slow development. It would probably blow all our budget lines. And we would be very late to the market, which is something we don't want to do. We want to be quick to the market and convince clients to jump on this new product platform. And because of the constant change, I like Gary's phrase in the morning, the endless loop of not getting things done. And it was, looking at the proposed solution with a highly complex relational schema that would, that would undergo changes in a constant cycle. We may have missed the boat entirely with such a solution. So we said on the business side, we said there has to be something else. There has to be a way to solve the problem. And we're sure we're not the first ones to solve this problem. So we heard that there is a new hope, a term I borrowed from Star Wars. But we thought maybe we're not really in the position to handle that. SQL has some cool promises on the horizon, and they sound like solutions to our problems. Especially, magically you can work without a schema. You don't need to declare a schema before ingesting data. You don't have to spend your time or waste your time on modeling because the reality changes much faster than you can change your model. That's true, or kind of true. And this schema-less operation, it leads to the way of working more agile. With an upfront design phase, there is no chance of being agile. But with ingesting data as is and interpreting the data when you need to interpret them, you can add functionality as you go. And this was very, very true. So we cut back our development effort by quite a margin by being agile. And another promise is that NoSQL technology would provide us with ways to display data or access data in ways unforeseen or not available on the relational side. Also, this holds very true. So we were beginners in the NoSQL arena, so we said, which product should we rely on? Let's do a POC. We decided to do a proof of concept. And because of the high legacy in XML, it was quite a natural choice to include MarkLogic. To my knowledge, there are not many products on the market who can do XML the way MarkLogic can do XML. But we had to deal with JSON as well. And there is a number of competitors in the market. Some of them we really ran through a POC. We did extensive market research and ruled out quite a few. But the first one, the native ingestion of XML and JSON, was a feature that MarkLogic could do very easily, and others either focused on a different format or they favored JSON and had to go through tedious conversion processes for XML at the time. So that didn't feel quite right. Secondly, we wanted full text access and linguistics even. That's something that MarkLogic provided out of the box, and we spent maybe 1 or 2 weeks to fine-tune this functionality over the course of 3 years, and it was very pleasant to use. Others can do this as well, but they typically require a separate search engine or a separate indexing technology to be married with the database, and that added a significant development and operational overhead that we didn't want to have on the project. One of the most important reasons for the MarkLogic decision was security, and Gary gave a few examples, even up to the point of common criteria. To my knowledge, MarkLogic is the only NoSQL product that really has this enterprise-grade security. And if you look at the nature of the data that we have at Hannover Re, containing applications, even though they're anonymized, they contain, to some extent, full medical records. The system's exposed on the internet. It's filtered through IP whitelisting and certificates, but it's still exposed on the internet. Can you imagine the reputational damage for the third largest reinsurance companies if the database just by accident is open on the internet? You don't want to have that. We didn't want to have that. And we want to play it safe. And it was a very, very convincing and compelling argument for MarkLogic as an enterprise-grade security database compared with all the new kids on the block, all the innovative technology that we could have. And there was a lot of great ideas in other products. But at the end of the day, we were not a research institute. We had to deliver. And we had to deliver in a dependable and a resilient way. We wanted to open data access also for people at the ODBC layer, for everything that our dashboard fails to provide, functionality that people wanted to have, but we have not included in the portal. We wanted to open a raw access to to the data so that they can use maybe Microsoft Excel or Tableau with Power Pivot and access the data in a kind of relational way. And MarkLogic at the time exposed this or provided this functionality, while others offered this too, but we found that relatively limited at the time. Maybe that changed. We found a very open, flexible programming model in many of the products, also in MarkLogic. In the database, we had a choice between XQuery and JavaScript. At the time, we made our choice for XQuery, and we were building the middleware, the portal, with Java APIs. So just very standard technology, and we have AngularJS front end on top. So that was very convenient and saved a lot of time. And again, combined with agile project methodology, the project was we had a small project team, just 4 people, and it was much, much quicker than any in-house database development that Hanover had ever seen to the point. And we wanted scalability, because I explained the data volume over 10 years. We wanted multi-site operations. For data protection, we are prepared to bring up new hosted installations in the APAC region or in the US. Not everything needs to be centrally hosted in Europe. And we wanted transactions that we just could rely on. And others offered this as well, but it required significant application programming skills to provide the same level of atomicity as the MarkLogic piece. So at the end of the day, it was at the time the optimal NoSQL product that would meet most of our requirements. So back to the slide where we started with the relational data warehouse. We could essentially replace this. The animation shows up with a MarkLogic instance. You should actually see the animated slide move forward. Once again, there we go. So we have a clustered MarkLogic instance running in Germany, taking applications and policies from all over the world for all the clients currently on the system. So that's a quick look at what the dashboard looks like. So maybe for a quick introduction, it displays the most relevant KPIs for clients, whether they are risk-related or sales-related. Users can log into that portal and pretty much like Microsoft Excel, build report pages, select the data, select widgets to display the data, so build their own reporting environment. It's not fixed, it's completely free. And because it is completely free, access to the data will come in a number of ways, also in a number of ways that we cannot really predict. So again, back to one of Gary's statements in the morning, it's not only the endless loop of not getting things done, it's the constant re-indexing, or I should say index optimization phase to make access to the data efficient that we don't have. So people can add statements here, people can go to the application files, and they're pretty complex actually, and pull out the pieces of information that they want to report on. That could be related to product and channel profitability, that could be related to potentially new customer segmentations. It could be related to the way how to improve the customer journey even more based on evidence, not on intuition, or you bring the intuition together with your evidence for superior decision making. And Hanover Re, as a provider of the service, is also in the position to compare clients in the same territory for a same set of products and go back to them and consult with them on maybe a underperforming or overperforming risk portfolio. So that's also very interesting from the client side and from the reinsurance side. And maybe finally, we're using quite a lot of MarkLogic functionality, and especially we like the Google full text search. We like the linguistics. At this point, we're not really using semantics. That's something that's on the roadmap for the future. But we are heavy users of the MarkLogic facets. And yeah, as you can see in the screenshot, we turned those facets into mini distributions that would update with every click you make. And just by looking at the distributions, as an experienced underwriter, you would see, for example, that the BMI, the body mass index distribution for a given constituency, for a given selection of applications is natural or not. And if it's not natural, you may drill into the situation further to analyze why this is the case and if there's something you need to do about it. Finally, you can have as many of these facets as you want. Also, big difference from typical relational systems where you have maybe a collection of dimensions that are pre-calculated. And you have all these famous cubes that you can slice and dice. But once you leave the cube, it's not going to be efficient. And we have hundreds, if not thousands, of facets in the system that you can just pull in, drag and drop, add to a constraint, and see what's happening just in real time as a user. No programming requirement. And finally, we have full access to the application. So it's not just an excerpt, it's the full application as it went through the process during sales. So what are the benefits from a collaboration with MarkLogic so far? It was very important that we work with an experienced company, that we can rely on a stable partner. And MarkLogic's been around in the market for quite a while. And they have a significant footprint in the NoSQL market. That was very important for a strategic decision like this. It's a well-proven, it's a production-hardened system. And after all the discussions we had with the IT architects, my expectation was that we would have to go through the same discussions with the IT operations guys. But they actually loved the product right from day one, because it's almost zero admin burden. Everything is automated, software deployment, data cross-loads from pre-production to production. Production is a clustered system. We've yet to experience a single failover. Everything just works very nicely, also from an administration perspective. And being a delivery company, not again a technology-savvy company, this is also a very important point that proved well. We have a single platform for all the data, textual data, structured data. Everything is in the same database. Everything is contained in the same transaction. We don't have to worry in the application code about keeping indexes consistent or reconstructing indexes if something has failed. That's all gone. It's all self-contained. It was very convenient from an application perspective. Also from a programming perspective, it was very good. We could focus on business requirements and not on technicalities. We have, I reinforce this point, we have a very strong, very dependable security. And we're actually looking forward to MarkLogic 9. Rumor has it that there is more security features to come, like encryption. We would probably be a very, very happy pilot client for MarkLogic because of the security amendments. We drastically cut back on time to market. We actually launched this to a pilot client from Scandinavia after only 6 months of development. And the estimation from the IT department would be 12 to 18 months before they have something workable. So that was a factor of 2 or 3, depending on how you look at it. So that was also very, very good. Well, and in the meantime, the MI part in the Hannover software portfolio has turned this offering into a competitive advantage. Clients really like it. As you can see, we have clients on board from Scandinavia, Germany, Russia, the US. We're looking at France right now, and we're preparing to take others on board around the world, alongside the sales rollout of the system, which takes place in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 countries, because we cannot handle everyone at the same time. What's on the roadmap? We want to complete the data universe. And I'm, again, repeating something that's been said in the morning. We are believers in a true, should see an animation. The next slide, please. No? No animation? I have one. So we want to complete the system. Right now it takes policies and applications. We don't take in-force data or claims, because our claim system is not part of the Reflex universe at this point. So we're looking at individual, if not proprietary solutions for clients. But with the data flexibility we have underneath, that's not going to be a challenge. It's just going to be work. So we want to complete the complete cycle of decision-making, automated decision-making at the point of sale, manual decision-making in the back office, in-force data during the lifetime of the policy, and at the end of the day also incorporate claims. And that would reveal true customer value perspectives, or as we say today, a 360 degree on on customer insights. That's what we are planning for one of the next stages. And finally, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. If anyone has questions from the audience, please raise your hand, and as Matthias said, he'll be happy to take them. But I have a question to start us off with. You know, I've been with MarkLogic for over 12 years now. I moved from Japan back to California to join this company. And so over the years, I've seen many customers all over the world make that transition from the relational world into this NoSQL space. And in the early years, that was before NoSQL and before big data. So those were truly early adopters. And now, of course, globally, it's becoming a little bit more mainstream, and it's not that unusual, and people are, you know, it's becoming more common. But here in Japan, it's still early in the market. And I think we have many members in the audience who are just becoming knowledgeable about these options, but haven't really made that transition yet. And you know, I've been with MarkLogic a long time, so I look at this technology, which is so proven and enterprise hardened, and I think, why wouldn't, you know, for the right class of problem, why wouldn't you come over and use MarkLogic? And most of our customers do. They find a problem that they can't solve in relational, and that's usually the point where they come over. But many prospects we see is frustrating, you know, rather than try something new, they just scope everything down to fit within the limitation of a relational database. So what was it at Hanover that got them over the hump rather than just scaling down and doing the traditional approach?
That's a good question, and I think Germany is in many ways similar to you know, the slow adoption rate of new technology, unlike the US, for example. It was the same hesitation that we could see internally, because there was a standard technology stack that Hanover IT was using to produce basically every application. But given the business requirements that we had, and given the fact that this system is not built in-house or for in-house purposes, but built to be sold and marketed to the clients of Hanover, there was not much discussion with the business side about making these sacrifices. The business just said, look, we need to have most of that stuff done, because that's what our competitors do, first of all, and secondly, that's what we want our clients to have in the year 2015 and 16. And that was probably the convincing argument that the IT said, well, we trust that this is good technology. We don't know how to handle it. Good luck, make it happen. But we want to stay close, actually, and have a look at what you're doing and how it really, you know, if it pulls off the ground. And it pulled off the ground, and now IT internally is discussing alternative solutions or technology also for in-house projects. So there's a bit of a learning curve. It needs some kind of trailblazing or pioneering spirit, and we were privileged to have that because of the business environment we were in, and there was a massive 8-digit, you know, software development initiative, and it was just too important to discuss technology questions at the end of the day. So that was a very typical way to adopt that, I would say, in larger corporations.
So it's interesting. There's so many different reasons people finally make the decision. In this case, it was a little bit of luck about where in the organization it happened. But one thing that's very consistent is once people do make that jump, nobody ever regrets it. Yes. Nobody ever looks back and says, no, I'd rather go back and design a schema for this. Everybody moves forward, and you don't hear about disasters for people who do take on this new generation. So we really want to be encouraging, I think, for people to make that jump sooner than later, because at this point, I think there's enough momentum that it's inevitable, and the earlier adopters will have key advantages there. And finally, one observation too, you mentioned at one point about loading, you know, the promise of no data modeling or loading as is, and I think that sometimes the marketing can get ahead of reality. And so I think it's a key point. You know, it's certainly true, and that you can load the data as is, but it doesn't mean that you use the data as is. And I think there's some learnings you probably got there.
Right. So it's true. We're focusing on an ELT, so we extract data. Actually, it's a greenfield operation. We don't have legacy data to use. It's data freshly produced in the underwriting systems, but then we load it as is, and we store it. And at query time, we interpret the data. And if the data is different, and it's different enough then we optimize. Of course, we do optimize index structures every now and then, but to a much lesser extent that was required in the relational world. To make it really effective, or to get the most out of the system, there is still indexing structures that can use. And schemaless is true for the ingest part, but it's not necessarily true for the interpretation part. But that's all we wanted. We wanted to be agile. We wanted to think about schema and the structure of the data and the semantics of the data only for the portion that we needed to focus on at the time when it was relevant. And compare this to an upfront design initiative where you have to anticipate 100% of all the use cases, which never works. I've never seen it work in any, even small projects. And we didn't have to worry about that because when a new use case came around, we just, it worked out of the box, and then we could fine-tune. We could take it from there and optimize. And that was, I think, the productivity factor that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Yeah. But just theoretically, there's always a schema because you need to interpret the data. So there's a structure, there's a schema.
Right. We want to set people's expectations properly. There'll always be data modeling. And the advantage here is just that the data modeling can continue to evolve, the indexing can evolve, and so it's growing with and alongside your business rather than being fixed. So that's, it's not MarkLogic, we always say, it's MarkLogic.
It likes change.
It likes change,
It likes to be changed, and it's easy to change. I think that's the big difference.
Right. And does anyone have any questions for Matthias from the audience? No? Okay. Thank you very much. It was a very fascinating insight into the reinsurance industry. Thank you for coming to Japan to do that.
Thank you.